flag it. Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I'll start. But before starting today's lecture, are there any questions from yesterday? Yes. So I'll just briefly recap what we did yesterday. We discussed something called dynamical ensembles, and we saw how we can define an action for the full in the full path space for each trajectory with respect to some reference process. And we also saw that this action can be decomposed into two terms: one time reversal invariant, which we call frenzy, and the other one is antisymmetric under time reversal, which we call entropy. And we also saw how to write explicit form for these quantities S and D for jump processes, and we explicitly saw what these forms are for random walk. So the question now is, what has this got to do with response? So this we will see today. So let's take a system in non-equilibrium. It can be steady or it can even be transient. So we add some perturbation at time t equal to 0. So for notational simplicity, what I'll do is that I'll consider that the system is already in non-equilibrium with some drive epsilon, and our perturbation is changing that drive by a small amount d epsilon. So this is my perturbation. And we will look for the linear change in some observable O, which can in general depend on the path even. So the linear change with respect to this d epsilon. So the proportionality constant is the susceptibility, as we have been defining before. So we see, I mean, from this relation, this chi is nothing but the derivative of the expectation value of O with respect to this d epsilon. And this is our response or susceptibility. And this has to be evaluated at epsilon, because we want to, I mean, we are perturbing at a non-equilibrium state. Okay, so now we basically apply what we did today. So we write the pathway in this epsilon ensemble in terms of some other reference ensemble which doesn't depend on epsilon. That's what we assume. This 0 path space. So with respect to this process, we have an action which I call a epsilon, which depends, I mean, which is different for each path. Now, expected value of any observable O in this non-equilibrium state can be written as a sum over all paths. So P epsilon omega times O omega, sum over all possible omega. And then I write the explicit form of P epsilon in terms of the action. Now all we have to do is just take the derivative with respect to d epsilon. So this only a epsilon is epsilon dependent. So we get d a epsilon d epsilon. This is the change in the action. And then this rest, the other part is nothing but P epsilon omega. Okay, so we have e to the power minus a epsilon P naught times O omega. So this is simply P epsilon omega. So this means this is an expectation value in the epsilon ensemble, an expectation of this excess action calculated with respect to d epsilon. So this is basically our response formula. We have the excess action caused by the perturbation d epsilon taken. I mean, we have to take its correlation with the observable O omega in the unperturbed space. So this is so as you saw, I mean, we did not assume anything about the initial state. In general, it's a non-equilibrium initial state, and so this is the general response formula. Okay. So now we can use this decomposition that we did yesterday. We can write it as correlation of the observable with the excess entropy and correlation with the excess frenzy. So this word excess is very important. It says that the correlation of the observable is to be taken with the excess entropy generated by the perturbation, which is just d epsilon here. Yeah, this should be all epsilons. I'm sorry for the type. So these are all epsilons. So we have a response formula. There are two terms. The first one is the correlation of the observable with the excess entropy, that we will call entropy component of the susceptibility. And the other one is the correlation of the observable with the excess frenzy, that we will call frenetic component. And as I said, this S epsilon prime and d epsilon prime are the excess entropy generated by the perturbation. So this relation is the fluctuation dissipation theorem in non-equilibrium. So was this derivation clear? It's just two lines. We have not done much, but was it clear?
Una, I mean, so from the, can you go back to the
previous slide? I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So from okay. So if, So this dA by d epsilon, so okay, so you have this A epsilon prime, and then how did you split this up into S?
So we had A equal to D minus S by 2. That was our splitting
Okay,
yesterday.
yeah.
And
Oh,
then
so
we
you
just
just
take
put
derivative throughout. Yeah, I just
okay.
put the this form. So A had two components. Of course, derivative of A also has two components, and their symmetry properties are exactly same. S prime is still average is over unperturbed Hamiltonian. So now we are talking about a non-equilibrium system. So there is not necessarily a Hamiltonian description. So Nandita, I'm answering your question. So there is no, I mean, necessarily there is no Hamiltonian description. So we start with some non-equilibrium distribution. Okay. So the system is already driven and the drive is some epsilon. So we are already in some non-equilibrium, and the question we are asking is that how does the response, how does the system respond when this drive is changed by a small amount d epsilon? Okay, if you remember the previous slide. So this is our perturbation. So we are already in a non-equilibrium state. We are changing the drive by a small amount, and we are asking how does the system respond? And we are looking at a particular observable O, which is completely generic. Does it answer your question? Okay, Prashant, we'll come to that. We'll of course come to that. We'll see how it is consistent with whatever equilibrium we knew. What is the physical meaning of reference process independent of epsilon? So epsilon is a drive, right? And that drive is coming through something. Either it's a potential or it's some external force. So we are considering a reference process which does not have this thing, although the path space is same. So once we get to some explicit example, it will become clearer. Or if you remember from yesterday, the random walk, in the random walk, we had this PQ unbalanced rates. So that was epsilon dependent. And the reference process was just P equal to Q equal to 1, where there was no epsilon. So if introducing a drive allows more trajectories, then of course this formalism will not work. So we are assuming that the path weights in the perturbed and unperturbed systems, they are absolutely continuous with respect to each other. If actually this is not true, then we'll run into trouble. We cannot apply this formalism directly. Okay? Okay, yes. Okay, so now we have a generic formula. So I see now I'm back to epsilon notation. So let's first look at the simplest observable, which is just a constant, just O equal to 1. Then of course the left hand side has to be 0. It doesn't change. The expectation value of 1 doesn't change when we add a perturbation. So that means we have to take, so the right hand side also has to be 0. So here we put O equal to 1. And that means that we must have whatever system, whatever perturbation, whatever dynamics, we must have half S prime epsilon omega average equal to D prime epsilon omega average. Okay, this must be true for all systems. And then using this relation, what I do is that I add and subtract S prime average times O average and D prime average times O average, and I express it in terms of covariances. So this semicolon in between that denotes a covariance of two variables A and B, which is AB correlation minus A average times B average. This probably most of you are familiar with. So this is the final formula we will use throughout today and tomorrow and day after. So this is our generalized Kubo formula for non-equilibrium systems. Okay, so now what we have is basically what we want, started for. We have an expression in terms of observable correlations only. We don't have any rho zero or the configuration weights explicitly visible. And we also have a physical meaning of the two terms in terms of entropy and frenzy. And this extra term, this frenetic term, is actually very crucial for out of equilibrium situations. And as you probably noticed that I did not put any restriction on the initial distribution. It can be a general non-equilibrium stationary state. It can even be a transient state. It can even be an equilibrium dynamics with some arbitrary configuration, which is not satisfying detail balance. And as somebody already pointed out, if the perturbation does affect the trajectory space, So if it so happens that by introducing the perturbation, I am allowing some new trajectories, or I am restricting some new trajectories from some old trajectories from appearing, then of course we cannot apply this formalism. Okay. So now we first need to see how we can go back to Kubo formula. We already know what happens in equilibrium, and whatever we are doing now must be consistent with what we already knew for equilibrium. So there my epsilon is 0, there is no drive. And let's take this observable, which is some O at xt, final time value of in the state, minus O of x naught. Okay, so this by definition is antisymmetric under time reversal. So if we trace the same path in the opposite direction, yes, there is. This maybe we can discuss after, okay, because this does not really directly concern. I don't know. This is in answer to you. Yeah. So we can discuss this after the main part is over. Okay. Yeah. So we have this antisymmetric variable now, what I call omega. It's just the difference of O at final time and initial time. So of course, if we trace the same trajectory in the backward direction, it will simply become O at x naught minus OXT, which is antisymmetric. And then we can write the susceptibility in equilibrium, which should be S naught prime, because we are evaluating the derivative at epsilon equal to 0 with y omega, minus D naught prime times y omega. Now this quantity is average of a time antisymmetric quantity. If you can see, so D naught prime is symmetric under time reversal, y omega is antisymmetric. So if we take the average in equilibrium, which itself is time reversal invariant, then of course it goes away. So this term disappears. So we are left with a chi, which is just, so now I am putting the expression for y here, which is simply just half S prime 0 O at xt minus S prime 0 O at x naught, both evaluated at equilibrium, because now we are talking about a perturbation around equilibrium. Okay, so now let's take the second term. So this term S prime 0 O x naught averaged over equilibrium, we can write as sum over all paths S naught prime in omega O x naught P equilibrium omega. Now let's make this sum over omega to sum over theta omega. It's the same space, omega and theta omega sum are same. But here, if we take S naught prime theta omega, that gives a minus sign. That's by definition. We said that S is antisymmetric under time reversal. OX naught now becomes OXT because we have reversed the path. So the initial position or initial configuration becomes the final configuration now in the reverse path. And then P equilibrium of course is invariant. So we have that this S prime 0 OX naught is same as minus S prime 0 OXT. Okay, so these two terms now become same. This is minus this thing. So just this half factor is going away, and we have only S naught prime OXT in equilibrium. So that we already saw on the very first day, that this is Kubo formula. We saw that Kubo formula is equivalent to saying that the response is given by the correlation of the observable with the entropy generated by the perturbation, that we saw. If you remember, we explicitly wrote this DDS of VSOT term, and we integrated and saw that this is exactly the entropy. Okay, so Prashant, does this answer your question? Yes, okay. So next is, we'll see how we can get Green-Kubo relations from there. So Green-Kubo relations are very well known in equilibrium. It predicts how transport in general and extended system, how I mean the transport coefficient. So if we apply some kind of thermodynamic drive, so that would generate a current in the conjugate variable, and Green-Kubo relations predict how the stationary value of this instantaneous current can be given or can be obtained by a correlation in the equilibrium state. So this here, J average epsilon. So now I'm using epsilon as just a small perturbation again, because we are near equilibrium. I'm not bothering with the epsilon every time. So epsilon is a small parameter here. So Green-Kubo relation. Yes.
In the previous example that you showed, before this y omega, no, after this, this y omega was antisymmetric under time reversal. That's why the entropic contribution came about, right?
Yes.
If we have the, like, instead of O, this one minus, if we had plus here, then the other term would contribute.
Sure, that is correct.
Even
We'll
in
see.
equilibrium, like
Anything what?
I'm saying, like, this frenetic term is important in equilibrium also then?
Exactly, yes. I'm very happy that you noticed it. Actually, the frenetic term is important when the observable is time symmetric. We'll see. I mean, I'll make a comment on that. But generally, the kind of observables we measure, or traditionally we used to measure, are all either state observable or things like current. So if you, I mean, if you remember how response formula typically came about, is talking about transport. So usually one measures current across a system, and then this is all, I mean, this is a time antisymmetric variable. So in fact, what you said is absolutely true. If we have a general path observable which has a time symmetric component, then even in equilibrium, this frenetic term actually appears. So we'll see that explicitly for random walk. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So for now, we are just seeing how Kubo formula is consistent with this. Okay. In Kubo formula, we had the single time observable OXT, and we saw that this path formalism successfully gives us the Kubo formula. And now we are going to talk about Green Kubo, which directly talks about current. So this small j is the instantaneous current, which means that the net flux per unit time. And Green Kubo relation says that this is given by an integral over time, and the equilibrium correlation, equilibrium to time correlation of the same current. Okay, this is a very famous relation. So now we will see how we can get this from the path observable. So for that, we define something called time integrated current, which is just integral from time 0 to t of this instantaneous current. Why we do this is because this J has a definite time reversal symmetry property. It's antisymmetric under time reversal, while this is not. This small j is not. So typically, when we, I mean, physically it's quite clear. If we apply some thermodynamic force, the entropy generated is in excess entropy generated by this force is basically proportional to the current. Okay, so S0 prime would actually be beta j. We'll see, I mean, numerous examples of that. Let's accept that for now. So then this response of this time integrated current around equilibrium is simply the variance of the same time integrated current with a factor beta by 2. Okay. So this is basically the Green Kubo relation in the path language. Let's see how we can get this. I mean, how this gives us the known form. So this we write as, I mean, we express this time integrated current as the integral of the instantaneous current. So we have two time integrals, both from 0 to t, and we have js prime correlation in equilibrium. Now this we can write as twice, first integral from 0 to t, second integral from 0 to s, when s is larger than s prime. Now this is equilibrium correlation, which means that this depends only on the distance s minus s prime. So using that variable transform, we can now write this in terms of the correlation j naught, I mean j0, j at time 0 and j at time s prime. Now we want to see what happens to the instantaneous current. So on the left hand side, we just take a derivative with respect to t. That gives us jt, small jt average in presence of the perturbation. And on the right hand side, we just get the inner integral because we are just taking a ddt. This integral drops off. So we have this form. Okay, epsilon beta integral 0 to t. So this talks about instantaneous current at some finite time t. Now if we take t going to infinity, we get back the conventional form of Green Kubo relation. Okay, so now we saw that the path integral formalism, whatever the response formula it gives, it is consistent with the most famously known equilibrium response relations. Next, we will go to non-equilibrium, but before that, is there any question regarding these two derivations?
Ma'am, can you explain again why small j is not antisymmetric?
Small j means the number of, suppose you have particle transfer. Small j means the number of particles transferred between the time t and t plus delta t. Okay.
Okay.
Something like that. Whereas this capital J, so it is like a instantaneous observable, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
So yeah. Anything else?
Is time translation invariance, doesn't it mean that it should be translated to S prime minus S?
Yes, it was. It was S prime minus S, but then this integral, not S prime minus S, in my definition here, just a second, S is the larger time. So it is S minus S prime. So we had J0, J S minus S prime. Then we can do a variable transform, right? I can call S minus S prime as S prime again. This does not change the limits. So it's exactly same.
Okay, thanks.
Is it clear?
Yes, thanks.
Yes. Okay. So now the question Prashant asked. So what happens if we have time symmetric observables? So suppose we have some observable O, theta O is equal to O. Then the first term, which is the correlation of O with S prime 0, that of course drops off because that becomes time antisymmetric, and we are left with only the frenetic term. So in case of some observables, actually frenesy is also important in equilibrium. So yeah, another physical example is the momentum current generated by shear, which is actually symmetric under time reversal. Or we'll see that this total traffic that we talked about yesterday in random walk, that is also another example, very simple example, where again near equilibrium the frenetic term will contribute. Okay, so now let's go back to the example of random walk and really write the response formula. So we have again random walk on a periodic 1D lattice. There is a driving field epsilon, which the jump rates P and Q depend on this field epsilon. And we talked about local detail balance yesterday. For today, it just suffices to say that that dictates P over Q is e to the power beta epsilon. Okay, so this just specifies the ratio of the two rates, does not specify the rates individually. So we can have innumerable choice of rates which satisfy this relation P over Q is e to the power beta epsilon, but still very different from each other. Okay, so we parameterize these rates as with some prefactor psi epsilon and then e to the power plus minus beta epsilon. So this means that P over Q is exponential beta epsilon and psi is just some arbitrary factor. Yes.
Unnati,
Yes.
you are saying like results wouldn't change with the individual values of P and Q as long as this ratio is kept fixed.
Can you repeat?
I'm saying like things are not going to depend on the individual values of this P and Q.
I did not say that.
As long as you didn't mean that.
No. What I said is that the thermodynamic constant brings us only here. Only P over Q has to be exponential beta epsilon. That actually also comes with the caveat that in equilibrium for this state observable or currents, we do not expect to see the effect of psi epsilon. But in non-equilibrium, that's not true anymore. That's what we will see. Okay. So that is the statement that thermodynamics, whatever we mean by thermodynamics, that only specifies the ratio of the rates. So this is like a coupling to some reservoir, right? So this drive is being provided by some reservoir, and we are asking how exactly the system couples to this reservoir. So thermodynamic constant is just saying the ratio of these rates has to be exponential beta epsilon. Similarly, when we have we'll see another example. Okay, so for now I am parameterizing this. So this is a completely general parameterization. Psi epsilon is some arbitrary function of epsilon, and it satisfies this ratio. Okay, P over Q, psi just cancels. I'm left with exponential beta epsilon. So a trajectory, we saw how to define a trajectory yesterday. We have sequence of jumps and waiting times. So let me call this number of jumps as NR and NL. NR is the total number of jumps to the right. NL is the total number of jumps to the left on a trajectory. These are of course stochastic variables. In each trajectory they are different, but it's as a path observable path variable, this is what we define. Okay. So yesterday we saw how to write this entropy flux. Okay. So again, now we know that it is only the derivative with respect to epsilon that will appear in the response formula. So I don't really want to care about what reference process I use. So I have dropped off all the terms which do not depend on epsilon, and I'm left with only this sum over all jumps log of k xi to xi plus 1 and xi plus 1 to xi. So this, so for all jumps to the right, this gives a contribution p over q. So we have a term nr times log of p over q. For all jumps to the left, this gives a contribution q over p. So we have a term minus nl log p over q, which is nothing but beta epsilon times j. J is I mean, that's how I define j. Nr minus nl, so that is the net displacement of the particle. That is my j, which is time antisymmetric, of course. And p over q, we knew it is exponential beta epsilon, and this is where we stand. So first notice that s omega is totally independent of psi. Psi doesn't appear here at all. Now if we write d omega, then again using the formula from yesterday, for each jump we have to look at the rate for the that jump and the reverse jump. So for each jump, this is nothing but p times q. So we have log p times q, and here, so for, I mean, it's just nr plus nl. Okay. So all right jumps comes with the factor log pq. All left jumps also come with the same factor log pq. And here we have the escape rate business. So p plus q is the escape rate for any position of the particle, minus lambda 0. But again, lambda 0 would not matter because we have to take the derivative. So here I have defined this integrated current nr minus nl, the net displacement, as I said, and then n is the total number of jumps up to time t, nr plus nl, which again you can see directly that it is a time symmetric quantity. It doesn't matter which way I go, which way I trace the trajectory, the total number of jumps is the total number of jumps. So it remains symmetric under time reversal. So now let's see what happens to the response of the current. Of course, this is a very simple system. We know what the current is. So in any time t, the current is nothing but p minus q times t. This we know from exact solution. But and the differential response is simply p prime minus q prime. P prime I denote by dd epsilon. So this is what it should be. But let's look at the right hand side. Okay. So if we use the response formula, we have the s prime term, which was so we had s was beta epsilon j. So s prime would be just beta j. So we have the variance of the current in epsilon, because now we are changing epsilon to epsilon plus d epsilon. So we already have a drive and we are changing the drive by a small amount and asking how much the current will change. And then the next term would give us this. So the correlation of the covariance of the current with the total number of jumps. So this term does not contribute because there is no dynamical variable here. So p plus q times t, if we take its covariance with j, that of course is 0, because p plus q is just a constant quantity. So in the end, we are left with only these two terms. One is the variance of the current, other is the correlation of the current with the time symmetric current. And here, if we use the form that we took for p and q, so log pq is simply psi square, and if we take the derivative, that's what we get. Okay, so this is the Coupeau term, this is the Ferenczi term. So the differential response of the current has these two contributions. And as we saw before, I mean, if we talk about response around equilibrium, this term would just drop off. We will be left with just variance of current. So this I will leave as homework, because here what we can do is that this right jump and left jump are of course independent Poisson processes with mean pt and qt. So these correlations jj and nj we can explicitly calculate. Okay, and if you calculate that, you will see that this comes out to be exactly p prime minus q prime. So maybe you can try it today and see if you can get this back. Okay, so I'll again take a break and ask if it was clear.
What should the final result be here?
Here, this, right? P prime minus q prime, because we know the current.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, yes. So now let's see what can happen if we go away from equilibrium. What are the physical phenomena that we can see? So as I said, around equilibrium, this is just variance of the current. which is always positive by definition, and this is also the green correlation that we saw. But in general, when we are away from equilibrium, both terms contribute, and here, so if you actually calculate this Nj, you will see that this is also. Did somebody write something? I see an annotation.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. No,
Yeah, there's a question now.
why did the second? You mean this P plus Q term, right? I cannot. How do I get this chat?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So there we had P plus Q times T, right? And we have to take the covariance of that term, P plus Q times T covariance with the current. So P plus Q is complete. It's a constant number. It depends on epsilon, but it's a constant number. It doesn't depend on J. So there is no covariance of that. So if we take P plus Q times J average, it's simply P plus Q times J average, which cancels with the covariance term. Is it clear, Aniket? Okay. Yes. So here, so if you actually calculate this Nj, you will see that that is also positive. But what can happen is that this psi epsilon, we said it's an arbitrary function. So if it so happens that I take a psi epsilon which decreases with epsilon, then this psi prime will be negative. And if this psi prime is sufficiently negative so that this whole term becomes quite large negative to cancel the positive contribution from this, then we can actually have a differential response which is negative. Okay, so this whole thing can actually become negative. And so this is known in various examples. I mean, there were various studies from quite early. There was one by Mustansir and Deepak, where they looked at behavior of current in some disordered lattice. There was one work by Zia, where he looked at what he called is getting more from pushing less. So this is now we are talking about this kind of a diagram, right? J average, the current average, as a function of some drive epsilon. And we said that near epsilon equal to 0, so this is my equilibrium point, this slope, which is the derivative, has to be positive. But now when epsilon is large, for specific dynamics, it can actually become negative. So the current can actually start to decrease. So this is what Zia termed as getting more from pushing less. So if you push less, the drive is small, the epsilon is smaller, then we can get more current than when epsilon is even larger. Okay, so this response formula actually provides a unifying formalism to understand this kind of negative differential response in all these kind of systems in non-equilibrium generally. Yes. What does this tell about absolute negative mobility? It doesn't. What I said doesn't tell anything about it. But now suppose you are in a non-equilibrium situation and you put a drive of a different kind. Okay, not just epsilon increasing to epsilon plus d epsilon. So here, suppose your initial state is already in some non-equilibrium, and you are adding some drive epsilon to it. Okay, and then this term becomes negative. Then you can have absolute negative mobility if your starting point is already non-equilibrium. Is it clear? Okay, and then there was a raised hand.
Yes.
Yes.
If epsilon is large, doesn't it mean that you need to use higher orders in perturbation theory?
If I am looking around equilibrium, but I am not. That's the point. I am not looking around equilibrium. I am not looking at epsilon equal to 0. What I am doing is that I am standing here at a very large epsilon, and my response is changing this epsilon by a very small amount. So I can still apply linear response theory, but around non-equilibrium.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So we will also see what happens if we look at a higher order response around equilibrium. Okay. Anything else? Okay, yes. So we saw an explicit example in for random walk. Now let's talk. So we were looking at response of the current, the time antisymmetric current. Now let's look at the response of time symmetric current, this total number of jumps in the trajectory. Again, of course, we know the answer. It should be P plus Q times T, because the average number of jumps to the right is simply PT, average number of jumps to the left is QT. We know the explicit answer, but let's, for fun, just apply the response formula. Here, the entropic term would actually be the NJ correlation, and the frenetic term will be a variance. So if we look around equilibrium, this is the term which will guarantee positivity, and the entropic term would simply drop off. As we saw, I mean, we took a general example of O theta equal to O. So this is an explicit case where around equilibrium, the response is purely frenetic, and I mean, if we go away from equilibrium, then of course both terms contribute, and depends on how what exactly is the form of psi that we can. But again, you can calculate these correlations explicitly, because this is an independent Poisson process. I mean, the right and left jumps are independent Poisson processes, and just try to do it explicitly and see that you get the exact result that you expect. Okay, so now we'll come to a second example. So far we have been talking about only single particle systems, simple single particle systems. So let's see if we can apply the same formalism to an interacting system. Let's take a boundary driven SEP, symmetric exclusion process. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, so I'll just introduce the model. So we have a lattice, 1D lattice, sides 1 to L, that's the size of the lattice. At each site, we can have one particle, or the site can be empty. So this I denote by some variable SI, which is 0 or 1. If it is empty, it is 0. If it is, if there is a particle on that site, then we have SI equal to 1. So the dynamics, how these particles move is first, in the bulk of the system, they hop with some rate 1 if the neighboring site is empty. So if we have a local configuration which is 1, 0, so a particle has an empty neighboring right neighbor, then it can move with some rate 1, and similarly to the left also. So this is the hopping dynamics in the bulk. And then this whole lattice, I mean, I'm taking an example where at the two boundaries, it is attached to two particle reservoirs with different chemical potentials, which I call mu L and mu R. So this is a diagram showing this system. At the bulk, we have symmetric hopping. At the boundary, the particles can enter from the reservoir, and the particle can also leave the system with some rate. So at the left boundary, these rates are alpha and beta. So if the first site is empty, then and then only a particle can come from the reservoir with some rate alpha. And if there is a particle here, that can leave the system with some rate beta. Again, local detail balance dictates that the rate of the ratio of these two rates should be given by exponential beta mu L. Mu L is my chemical potential. So this is this you can easily see that that this definition of chemical potential is consistent with what we knew about chemical potentials in equilibrium. Okay, and at the right boundary, similarly, we have some rates gamma and delta. Gamma is the entrance rate. If the site L is empty, a particle can enter. If it has a particle, it can go with some rate delta, and gamma by delta is exponential beta mu R. So mu L and mu R are not equal necessarily. If we have two different chemical potentials at the two ends, so it's like a boundary drive. Like a temperature gradient, it's a chemical potential gradient, and we expect some particle current to flow through the system. Now, what we do is that we also put another bias in a certain bond. Let's say the central bond. So what we say is that the jumps across this bond is biased. So the right jumps occur with rate P, left jumps occur with rate Q. So now we have two sources of non-equilibrium. We have the chemical potential difference at the two ends, and we have a biased rate at a certain bond. It's a very local bias. Okay. So yes. So first thing is the model clear? The dynamics, is it clear? Or are there any questions? So I guess it's clear. So we have this exclusion process with two different kinds of drive.
Uda, I think there's one question.
Okay.
Sunghan.
Yes. So here we are having the chemical potential difference. So imposing all the detail balance, local detail balance is natural. But another example you are mentioning is the temperature gradient. In such case, where beta will be different according to the which location I'm looking at, which might have some ambiguity in.
Yes. So, okay, it was, I mean, I should not have mentioned temperature gradient. I just mentioned it because that's another example of boundary drive. But how we actually implement a temperature gradient is a different kind of question. Let's not go there because
okay.
Yeah. So for now, just think about this system where we have a chemical potential gradient, okay, which is simply defined by this certain set of rates. Okay, another thing I must mention is that again, as we saw before in the case of random walk, this chemical potential and the biasing field does not totally specify these rates. So we can have a whole, infinitely many different sets of alpha and beta, which corresponds to the same chemical potential. Okay, so yes. Just a small clarification, the bias epsilon can be applied to any bond near boundary or inside. Yes, no, there is no choice. Just across one bond. Okay. There is no choice. So the idea of this example is to show how general this response formalism can be. So I mean, nothing. You can even apply bias at all the bonds. That is also perfectly fine, or even different bias at different bonds. So let's, for simplicity, I took just one bond, which is biased. So the configuration of the system is now given by the set of SI. So it's sum 1, 0, 0, 1, etc. This is one configuration. Now to write the path weights, we need to know what is the escape rate. So given a configuration, how many ways can it escape from it? So basically anywhere locally, if we have a 1, 0, local configuration, if it is 1, 0, it can escape with rate 1. Similarly for 0, 1. So these are the terms. So we sum over all the bonds which are 1, 0 contribute 1 to the escape rate. All the bonds which are 0, 1 also contribute 1 to the escape rate. And then we look at the bond which is biased, that I call K. That particular bond, if it is 1, 0, the escape rate is P. So we have this P here. And if it is 0, 1, we have this rate Q. And then at the boundary, if the boundary site is empty, so if S1 is 0, then this is only contributing. 1 minus S1 is 1. So we have a rate alpha with which a particle can come, which means that the configuration is changing. And then if there is a particle at the left boundary side, so if S1 is equal to 1, we have an escape possibility with beta, the rate beta, and similarly at the right boundary. So is it clear how we wrote the escape rate?
Yes.
Okay. So this driven bond, I'm calling it K now. Okay. And so note that even if we have P equal to Q, the system is still in non-equilibrium. And even if we have mu L equal to mu R, then with epsilon, it will be in non-equilibrium. So let's look at the observable, which is the current across the central bond, which is, I'll call N right minus N left. N right is the number of jumps towards right during this time 0 to t. Okay, so in all the 1, 0 configurations which became 0, 1 across this kth bond, this is N right, and N left is similarly the left jump. Okay. So let's first look at response around epsilon equal to 0. So there we want to take the excess entropy with respect to epsilon. So let me just write the terms in the entropy flux which only depend on epsilon. The other terms I can ignore because I am going to take a derivative in the end anyhow. So S omega is nothing but this N right minus N left, because only terms which are depending on epsilon are P and Q. So we just have to write, we just have to take log of K, the ratio of rates only across this kth bond. And we again have a very similar form to the random walk case. So epsilon beta j plus some epsilon independent terms which you don't care about. For frenzy, now the first term is very similar again. We look at all the transitions across this bond. Each of them will contribute log PQ. So we have minus half total number of jumps times log PQ. Now this integral over the escape rate that we had, integral lambda xs, that now is a bit different. So if we look at the escape rate, this we have to integrate over some time t and then again take the derivative with respect to epsilon. So first of all, we can again neglect all these terms which are not dependent on PQ. So this last 4 terms and first 2 terms, that's gone. And then if we integrate this, what would it give? We want to integrate, so P is again constant, and this thing will basically hit only when the local configuration is 10 at kth bond. So this time integral would give me T10, which I call T10, is the total time the system spent when the local configuration at the kth bond is 10. And similarly, we will have Q T01. Okay. So is this clear how I define T10 and T01 and why these are appearing? Okay. So this is what we have. So we see that the first, so the entropy is very similar to random walk because it's a symmetric walk after all in the bulk, and when epsilon equal to 0. And then in frenzy, we have one term which is essentially the effect of interaction. Earlier, when we had single particle random walk, there was no such term. There is nothing called 10. This 10 is exactly the effect of interaction, because at each site we cannot have more than one particle at one time, and it jumps only when the neighboring site is vacant. So let's write the formula for conductivity. So how the current, this current across this kth bond changes when I change epsilon. Yes. No, we are not. We are not looking at mu left equal to mu right. It can be arbitrary mu L, mu R. So yes. So now we can take the derivatives and write the formula. So this is just a straightforward calculation. The first term is still variance of the current. This is the Kubo term. And then the entropy term is much more complicated than compared to random walk because of interaction. And then each of these terms will actually depend on how, I mean, what is the exact form of PQ. This is not a function of P over Q only. The first term is just variance. This will be different depending on what explicit forms of P and Q we use. And so now if we put epsilon equal to 0, so we are looking at around P equal to Q, but this is still non-equilibrium. So this variance of J will, so first of all, these other terms will not vanish because the reference, the unperturbed system is not time reversal invariant. There is still the bias across the system because of the presence of 2 different chemical potentials. And this, yes, so we'll have this full formula even when epsilon equal to 0. Okay. Okay, so we had this, we saw how we can write a response formula for the current across a single bond for a set which is driven with two different kinds of non-equilibrium drive. One is boundary drive, another is bulk local drive. So now we can also ask what happens if I change the boundary drive. We saw what happens if we change the bulk drive, but now if we change the boundary drive, again we can follow the same procedure, but now this S and d omega will have different terms. The relevant terms will be different. Now we are changing, so let's for specificity, let's see. So we are changing the left chemical potential by a small amount d mu L. The right chemical potential is same, and epsilon is still there. There's still a bias in the bulk. So now we have to write all the jumps that involve this left reservoir. So this entropy term then is, so for all the jumps where there is a particle coming in the system at the left boundary, so this is what I call NL in. For all these jumps, I will have log of alpha over beta, because for each of these jumps, a particle coming in, the reverse jump will be a particle going out, which has a red beta. And similarly, for all the jumps where a particle goes out, the reverse jump is a particle coming in. So we'll have NL out log beta by alpha. So which, if we sum, gives us this J in L, which I have defined as the difference of in input and output flux. So this is the net number of particles which entered, the net number of particles which entered the system from the left boundary. Again, because we had this relation between alpha and beta, we have J in L times beta mu L, and S prime, now we have to take the prime with respect to mu L, would simply be beta times J in. Okay, and frenzy, now we have to look at again transitions which involve alpha and beta. So yes,
Unnati,
yes,
in that current, like there won't be contribution from the bulk part.
which current? This one, this current.
JL in, yeah, this is just the like whatever number of particles have
Yes.
come and whatever particles have left. But
Yes.
there will be like particle current due to the dynamics of individual particles
Sure.
at the bulk also, right?
Sure. Yes.
Then why those contributions are not appearing in this J?
No. So,
in this
remember one thing.
entropy
So they are
definition?
not. Yes. So they are not appearing in this S prime thing. So are you worried that they are not contributing physically? Is that what you are worried about? So remember that we have to take.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it appears like it seems to me, at least intuitively, S omega should have some contribution from those currents also.
S omega has some contributions, of course, but again, I wrote only the terms which depend on mu L. So here there are some mu L independent terms, because in the end we saw that in the response formula we will have S prime, right? We will have just the derivative with respect to mu L. So it's only this term, the net current, net influx at the left boundary, which will contribute in the response formula. But that does not mean that the response itself is completely independent of this bulk drive. So remember, we have to take an average of this quantity. Yes.
The bulk current may also depend on mu L, right?
It will, sure, but not in an explicit form. So all these contributions will come when we take the average. Remember, we have to take the expectation with respect to the unperturbed system, which is still mu L, mu R, epsilon, but not explicitly, not in the formula itself.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it will come through the averaging in the unperturbed system.
Okay.
So I'm not claiming that the response, whatever susceptibility we will get, that will be independent of epsilon. That I cannot claim. That is absolutely wrong. That will depend on epsilon, but only through the averaging of the unperturbed system.
No, by epsilon, like epsilon quantifies the ratio of P by Q, right?
Sure. Yes.
But I'm saying, like, even if we change mu L or mu R, then even the bulk current should change.
Yes, it will. So we will look at exactly that's what we are looking at now. So for now, so it depends. So how this bulk current will change when we change mu L, that's exactly what we are. Just give me one second. So there's one question from Ion. I'm a bit confused. I don't understand how P equal to Q still correspond to non-equilibrium. If the two baths are at different chemical potentials, then local detail balance should ensure some relation between P and Q. No. Okay. So local detail balance is local, remember. So the bath which is enforcing this PQ drive, that's completely independent of the particle reservoirs at the two ends. So that is the essence of local detail balance. All the reservoirs that we have in the system, they are not talking to each other at all. So the left bath is independent of the right bath, and both of them are independent of the thermal bath, which is giving this P over Q constant. Okay. And even with local detail balance, so alpha over beta is giving this mu L, and gamma over delta is giving mu R. But because these two chemical potentials are different, so even though there is local detail balance at the two boundaries, there is still a current flowing, because I mean there is a boundary. I mean the whole system is not in detail balance, just local. Okay. Yes. Which are taken care? No, sorry. Ion, what is taken care of by alpha beta? The chemical potentials, yes. So local detail balance at the left particle reservoir takes care of alpha beta. Yes, exactly. And the local detail balance at the right reservoir, that takes care of gamma delta, and the local. Okay. Yes. So now we have this. Where was I? Yes, we are looking at this entropy generated due to the change in the left reservoir chemical potential. Okay, and we saw that it's only the influx at the left boundary which appears, And similarly, we can write the frequency. So the first term again is now, by now you are familiar with it, it's just the total number of transactions of the system with the left reservoir at, total number of transactions of the system with the left reservoir. And this comes with the factor log alpha beta. Here, now again, we have to think what is the escape rate. So escape rate we saw, we wrote as a sum of various things here. But now again, we have to take a derivative with respect to mu L, which so only alpha and beta are dependent on mu L. So it suffices to keep only these two terms. Okay, so we have to integrate this. If we integrate this, it will give me the total time during which the first site did not have any particle. And similarly, this term would give me the total time during which the first time had a particle. The sum of these two, of course, should be equal to T. So this is what we have: alpha times T naught plus beta times T1. Sum is equal to T, but we don't really need to care about that. Would be taken care of by the dynamics. Plus, there are some mu L independent terms that we don't care. Okay. So now let's answer Prashant's question. So what we are looking at now is how the current across the kth bond. So we are still looking at the current across the kth bond. We can look at any other quantity, but we are looking at the bulk current, and we are seeing how it changes when we change the chemical potential. So this is the formula now we have. So for that, we have to take the correlation of that current, whatever we are measuring, with this influx, with this incoming current at the left boundary, plus some other terms. One of them is the correlation of the current J with the total number of jumps at the left boundary, which this is the NLJ. And here I have explicitly mentioned this mu epsilon. Mu means both mu L and mu R. So these expectations are to be taken at this non-equilibrium condition where we have mu and where we still have mu L and mu R, which are different. We can of course take mu L and mu R equal to, they are equal. The expectation values would change, but the formula will not change. And here we have alpha prime minus beta prime T naught J. Here I have used the fact that T naught at T1 the sum should be equal to T. So now here this is the Kubo term. Here Kubo term is not in the form of a variance anymore. It's the correlation of two different currents, because we are perturbing a certain current. We are perturbing the rate which directly affects a certain kind of current. And we are looking at a different kind of current as an observable. Okay, and here the frenetic terms depend explicitly on how alpha beta are changing with mu L. We did not say anything about how they change. We just said that the ratio has to be given by mu L. So I think I'll more or less finish for today. So what we saw is that we basically derived a general prescription for writing linear response around a non-equilibrium system. We saw how this path integral formalism reduces to the equilibrium limit all the famous known results of equilibrium. We saw some explicit examples like random walk and SAFE. And in both these cases, we saw that the time symmetric or the kinematical aspects become crucial. And as Prashant pointed out, it is also important in equilibrium when the observable it contains a time symmetric part. So I'll stop and take questions if there are.
There's a question in the chat box.
Why is the chat box not?
It says how different are baths giving P equal to Q and P by Q equal to exponential beta epsilon.
I don't understand. How different are baths giving P equal to Q and P over K exponential beta epsilon? What do you mean by how different are baths? So basically, when P equal to Q, there is no drive, right? And when there is an epsilon, we are adding some drive. And we are saying that because the whole system, so throughout this we have used a single beta, so the whole system is in a thermal bath, and so all the drives that we are adding, whatever entropy or work is done on the system is actually losing that work as heat or entropy in that bath in this bath of temperature, inverse temperature beta, and that is what is putting this constant. So this reservoir, the particle reservoir and the drive, particle reservoirs, both of them, and the drive, all of them are, I mean, the whole system with these reservoirs, everything is immersed in a thermal bath of inverse temperature beta. Okay, so yes, Sungan is asking something.
Yes. So here, as an interaction, we considered excluded volume interaction, right?
Yes.
So is there any other formalism which can consider take the like other type of interactions, such as attractive interaction between the particles in the
Yes, yes. So what we will do tomorrow is, so until now we have basically used as examples just jump processes. So tomorrow basically I'll see how we can do these things for diffusion processes, for example, just a potential interaction or those kind of things. And there also, maybe it will be more familiar to many of you, because there we'll talk about forces and potentials, etc.
So you're going to derive the observables, how observables change according to the specific form of the potential corner that we are implementing? Is it?
Yes, or well, yes.
Okay, is it going to be done in 1D or?
I will do it in 1D, but you can easily generalize it into higher D.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so only complication is coming. So as you, I mean, probably realized, only complication is coming from how we can write the pathways. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So for higher dimension, of course, there are more variables. One has to take care of more variables. That's a bit tedious on PowerPoint, but the strategy is very straightforward. So what I'll do tomorrow first is that I'll talk about how for overdamped dynamics, single particle overdamped dynamics, because there is some specific kind of intricacies appearing in overdamped dynamics. We have to talk about Stratonovich and Ito integrals to separate this entropy and frenzy. We have to talk about work and I mean real mechanical work. And then once we understand how to do it for a single particle, then we can easily generalize it to any particles or any dimensions.
Okay, thank you.
What is the reference for this SAPE thing you did?
I don't know if there is any reference. For
Okay.
SAPE, I don't know. Yes, but was any part not clear? I mean, we still have time.
No, like I wanted to derive some of the things. So
there is one paper by Salazar and Maes where they did it for zero range process. For SAPE, I don't know. You want it for specifically for SAPE or?
no, yeah, the random part was more or less clear. This, like, some of the expressions I couldn't follow, so I wanted to see like how they come about.
So if you actually look at the paper for zero range process, I think it will be similar.
Okay.
But otherwise, I mean, we can also do it together at some moment.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's one request. So since tomorrow, can you like upload the slides beforehand, because sometimes it's essential like to go back to the previous slide when you're doing this slide. So it would be great if that is done.
Yes. I'll do that tomorrow. Yes, that's a good idea.
So Unna, I mean, I guess, I mean, in this new form now, it's also easy to, like earlier you said that for the Agarwal formula, I mean, it's difficult to simulate, right?
Yes.
You don't know here, I guess that problem is not there, right?
Yes, no. So, okay, maybe I should explicitly say it. Yeah, because now we have everything in terms of correlations of observable. So here we have correlation between the current and total number of jumps. Or this time, something called residual time, and how much time the system spends in a certain configuration. So all of these things, because they are observables, we can very easily measure in simulations or an experiment. So that makes it very much applicable. I mean, in most cases, we will not be able to actually compute analytically all these correlations, right? Even in equilibrium, we were often not, because there was 2-point correlations, 2-point time correlations appearing. But as in Kubo formula, we had 2-point time correlations of 2 observables. We could directly measure it in experiment or simulation. Here also, we can measure all these things. So that's the great benefit of path integral formalism over Kubo-Agarwal.
Yeah, no other.
Should I take a break for so it's 12. Should I take a break for 5 minutes for people to think about questions, or should we? I mean,
Yeah, maybe 2 minutes break.
okay.